There is no better time of the year than right now for South Dakota high school football playoffs, so we're going to break it all down on Football Insiders. Semifinals this week in all 7 South Dakota classes. David Brown, Jason Andera, and we have fantastic matchups all across the board.
These teams can just taste the dome. They want one more game.
Stale hot dogs and all.
The stale hot dogs and all. They want to get one more game because that puts them on a stage that you don't normally get in high school football when you get to play in the championship game. And some of these teams have been at this step several times and not been able to knock on that door. And you can just tell that these teams are dialed in and ready to make that final push.
Well, let's break it all down. 7 classes, 2 semifinals each class, 14 games to break down. We will start in 11 at AAA. Number 4, Brandon Valley. Number 1, Sioux Falls Lincoln. We will have that game live on Midco Sports on Friday evening from Howard Wood Field. And we've mentioned it all year. Lincoln's been a team on a mission, seemingly unstoppable. So the question for Brandon Valley is, can they slow the game down? And that doesn't necessarily mean slow it down on defense. It's can the offense have long drives keeping the Lincoln offense off the field?
Well, they have the biggest offensive line in the state, that's for sure. And Gus Scott has come in and done a wonderful job rushing for over 100 yards in the last few games. They've used Devion Bonwell-Whitty in the backfield. I think they will be able to run the football and take up some time in this game. They'll have to make some adjustments on the defensive side, though. Jack Smith absolutely torched them last year, and Tate Schaefer made it look easy. They're going to have some type of an answer for that, some type of an adjustment to make Lincoln use some of their different weapons to get this win.
Yeah, if you remember a little less than a month ago, it was Lincoln 55-13 at Brandon Valley. You mentioned Jack Smith. 6 touchdowns, 1 on special teams, 5 through the air. Just an unbelievable performance by them. But as you mentioned, Brandon Valley with that offensive line, shout out, by the way, to Navarro Shunke, choosing to go to Kansas State a little earlier this week. But if that offensive line can get some push and they can get that running game going, I'm not saying necessarily it's going to be closer than people will expect, but I think Brandon Valley will do better this time than they did last time.
Yeah, and Levi Veskerna has not been able to play over the last month since this last time that they played in early October. But even without him, they've still been able to move the ball. So that's going to be the key for me. Can Brandon Valley move the ball on the ground?
And then for Lincoln, undefeated. They've scored 55 plus in each of the last 6 games, including this Brandon Valley game from a couple of weeks ago. And so we talk about Lincoln as a team, you mentioned a little earlier, teams that have been knocking on the doorstep. Lincoln's made the semifinals each of the last 3 years and dropped in this round each of the last 3 years. They haven't made the Dome since they won back-to-back titles in 2013 and 2014. So is this Lincoln team mature enough not to have a misstep?
They know the job is not done, and I think those losses in the last few years with these seniors looking at that and saying, that ain't going to happen to us. They're just going to be an extra level of focus. They are not overconfident by any means. Maybe a couple of them have that supreme confidence that they need to challenge any team in the state, but I don't think they're going to come in here thinking, oh, we beat them, whatever it was, 55-13 last time. We're going to show up and that's going to happen again. I don't think that's the case. This team is definitely focused.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think Lincoln is certainly focused, has certainly been on a mission this entire year. I will abstain from picking this game since I am calling it. And your opinion on this?
I'm not going to be on the game, so I'm going to take the Lincoln Patriots. I think they finally get to the title game somewhere they haven't been since, what was it, 2013?
13 and 14, yeah.
13 and 14 when they had those undefeated teams, and they'll kind of restore some of that glory from those that 10 year ago.
Should mention, by the way, as far as our picks last week when it came to picking the quarterfinals, we picked 27 of the 28 games. We abstained from Dakota Valley, Sioux Falls Christian since we were both on the call for that one. I went 22-5. You went 20-7. So you're 2 games back.
I took a few chances that did not pay off. I took a few chances that did, but more that did not. And yeah, you said we have what, 2 different this week?
Yes, as we go through,
I don't know what his
2
picks
differences this week.
He knows mine, so that's how he knows there's 2 difference. I'm going to have to be nearly perfect this week.
All right, that's Brandon Valley and Lincoln. Moving on to the other AAA semifinal, Harrisburg and O'Gorman. And this was the classic end of the regular season. It was going to determine who hosted this game if it came to fruition. And it was Harrisburg with a late touchdown in the final minutes and then holding off O'Gorman 19-17 in that regular season finale. And wouldn't you know it, a couple weeks later, they're back again in Harrisburg.
There's been a couple games this year that Harrisburg has played where they have outplayed the opponents by more than what the score ended up. And this is one of those games that felt like they outplayed O'Gorman throughout that game, but they only won by a couple points because they did not cash in the red zone. And that's one thing Brandon White said is, we have to be money now. Points are going to be a premium in this game. We have got to find ways to score touchdowns when we get into the red zone.
And you look at O'Gorman, obviously them having a chance there in the final minutes. And I look at the totality of O'Gorman's season. They had the comeback against Brandon Valley opening week. And then throughout the season, there have been highs and lows in terms of production on both sides of the ball. And that's one of the things head coach Jason Popping had talked about is their best players are two-way guys. And so how do you factor that in terms of stamina and fatigue and being able to be at your best when the best counts?
Well, Jason Popping told me that if we could just clone our 6 guys and have 6 guys on offense and defense, we would feel much better about our chances against Harrisburg because basically that's what Harrisburg has is they have 6 really good offense players, 6 really good defensive players, or probably more than that. But that's just not the case. They've been trying to give breathers throughout the games in some of these last few weeks to their guys so they don't have to play both ways. But this is one of the games that you're going to have to ask your guys to go out and play 50, 60, 70 plays on both sides of the ball.
And yeah, that was my big question for O'Gorman is can they get enough consistency on both sides of the ball from their best players? And then for Harrisburg, we mentioned it at the beginning of the year. They were a very pass-heavy team, couldn't find a consistent running game. Josiah Hines has answered that question. So can Harrisburg continue to be a balanced team offensively?
Yeah, that's one huge improvement that Harrisburg's made throughout this year. Hines giving them 7 yards per carry, 4 touchdowns, a couple of breakaway speed touchdowns that they weren't getting early in the year. The offensive line has come together and done a nice job blocking. It's freed up Levi Danielson, I say this every week, to play every play on the defensive side, which has really helped their defense. So yeah, you can see it in that illustration right there, being able to have Levi Danielson and having a guy like Hines, where O'Gorman has to have Maverick Jones play both sides of the ball. That could come into play big time in the fourth quarter.
Both these teams have 8-2 records, but again, that regular season game determined where this game was going to be. Had O'Gorman won, this game would have been at McEnany Field. Instead, it is at Tiger Stadium in Harrisburg.
But I'll tell you what, whenever Jason Poppinga, Shannon Poppinga, and the rest of that O'Gorman coaching staff have a chance to go over film and make adjustments, they make a lot of really good plays, and they usually play better the second time they play a team in a season. So, and not saying that Harrisburg won't be able to do that too, but I would look for some improvement there. This is really a toss-up.
This is a very difficult game to pick, so what is your pick?
I am going to take Harrisburg. I think the home field advantage will end up making them the favorites in this one. I think their red zone threats are better than the red zone threats on O'Gorman and Titan Tryon. He has been really hard to stop throughout this year, and when he only has to play one side and Ryland Satter has to play both, I got the Tigers.
You look at the weapons for Harrisburg. Sam Knuth has obviously improved over the year as a quarterback.
He's had a really, really nice year. His completion percentage over 70. His yards have been phenomenal. He's quietly had a really good season.
You mentioned Titan Tryon. Max Carlson has also been fantastic. Harrisburg has all these weapons, but I'm taking O'Gorman in this one. And the reason being is I understand the fatigue factor that might come in with some other two-way players. I just think this is a game where Maverick Jones is going to have a breakout game. I think that he, over the course of the season, has become more well-known. Over the years has become more well-known, especially to people who follow high school football. But I think in totality, he's one of the most underrated players in this entire state. And I think him and Satter and Theobald, in totality, are big-time players who, as the cliche goes, make big-time plays in big-time games. For some reason, I just think those three in particular are going to up their game up another level. It was a close game last time. I think the Knights get the better of them this time.
I tell you what, I'm not going to really defend my position because I could see that happening as well. But two really good teams with a lot of talent on the field. And it's going to be a great game at the end. I'm almost assured of that.
So there's one of our two differences. You got Harrisburg and I got O'Gorman in the other AAA semifinal. Moving on down to AA. Number 4 Watertown and number 1 Pierre. A rematch of the regular season late September. Pierre won that game 49-20. It was in the capital city. And for Watertown, again, it was their first playoff victory in almost a decade. It had been since Halloween 2013 that the Arrows last won a postseason contest. And to me, the question for the Arrows is, can they slow the game down? Can they rely on Juvid Hudson and that offensive line to have long, well-sustained drives?
Well, if you look at their strength of their team, it's their offensive line and it's their all-world running back, Juven Hudson, who, whether he gets blocks or doesn't get blocked for, he seems to make a great play. So yes, they have the opportunity to slow this game down by trying to dominate up front. But on the other side, Coach Steele, he always has an answer to try to take your best player out. He did a great job of trying to take out Juven Hudson the first time that they played. It was a fairly close game through the first quarter and a half before Pierre really started to dominate that game physically. So can they? Yes. They are a better team than they were a month ago.
They are.
So we'll see if Watertown has what it takes to maybe push this game a little later into the game and still be competitive.
And for Pierre, it's just a matter of getting off to a good start, because I think that defense, when you look at the scope of all the great players they have on both sides of the ball, if that defense has a lead, they really do not relinquish it at all.
Yeah, they need to win that battle on the defensive side, just like you said. And they've had some really good defensive players. Chance Sardis had a phenomenal year. Anderson up front has been one of the most destructive players that they've had in the last few years at Pierre. So they're going to have to come up big and really disrupt Trayton Hamrick and not let him do anything as they really focus on shutting down Juven Hudson.
And then you look at just some of the offensive guys for the Governors. Obviously, Jet Sable's having another phenomenal year. Trey Lewis, Brock Mosher, Cade Kaiser taking over at quarterback. I mean, the weapons are aplenty for Pierre. The old joke is they don't rebuild, they reload, and they're seeking their 7th straight AA championship.
And I had a chance to talk to John Hodorf earlier this week, the Watertown head coach, and he said, we're not worried about what Pierre's going to bring, because Coach Steele, if something's not working, they will figure out something else that will work, because they have enough players to do so. So he's focused on what can we do that Pierre has to react to, not what do we have to react to what Pierre's doing.
When you look at the overall numbers and you just look at these games, Pierre leads AA in both offensive scoring and defensive points per game allowed. So you look at that, you look at where Watertown is. Watertown has had a phenomenal year. Congratulations to the Arrows for, steadily improving over the years. I know there have been some tough times in Watertown in terms of the football program and their success, but I think the journey ends here. I just think Pierre is too good. I think Watertown will make things competitive for a little bit, but I do think Pierre goes to the Dome for a 7th straight year.
I think so too. I think there's no reason to think that Steve Steele and a healthy Governor team behind him, with Cade Kaiser doing a great job and Jet Zabel being basically the best player in this class, they will find a way to get this done. So
we're both picking Pierre in that semifinal. The other semifinal, number 3 T and number 2 Yankton in AA. And the question for T is, are they going to keep pounding the rock? This has been their bread and butter for so long. They finally got a little more consistency toward the end of the season with all their guys, whether it's Conrad at QB or Keegan DeYoung in the backfield. They've gotten that figured out. But then for Yankton, they're going to get healthy. How are they going to utilize all the offensive weapons that they have? It was a 37-26 game in favor of the Bucks earlier this season. I think this game's going to be a little bit closer.
I think it's going to be much closer. You saw how Huron cut the deficit against Yankton in just 1 week, playing them a second time. Well, T area should be able to cut that deficit too. There was an 11-point game the last time these two teams played. But to answer your questions, will T be ground dominant? Keegan DeYoung missed part of the end of last game that he didn't have to play. Maybe he could have if he would have had to. I don't have a report on how he's doing this week. But if they're not 100% in the backfield, that's really going to be trouble for them. So can they keep running? Well, yeah, they've done a great job as the year's gone on, getting better and better at dominating the game on the ground. Yankton, will they be able to use all their playmakers? Yes, they will, because they have the ultimate quarterback who can distribute the ball. And Lucas Kamshoff may be the best quarterback in this class. And Evan Circus stepped up. Now they have Shaler Platt back this week. That should help a lot. And Tucker Gilmore, Austin Goebel, Carson Ness, tons of weapons. Cameron Zarbach been able to make plays on the outside for them as well. So that is the advantage for Yankton. More weapons. They're at home. I'm going to take the Big Red here in a slight victory over T, who's been automatic here these last few seasons getting to the Dome.
Yeah, I went back and forth on this game. I thought about T's pedigree, like you said, in terms of being able to get to the Dakota Dome each of the past couple seasons. And kind of the question this year is who would become the biggest challenger to Pierre in this class. We thought it would be T. he didn't necessarily struggle. They just didn't look as consistent early in the season.
Right.
Yankton looked really good, and they still looked good even without some of their best guys hurt like Shaler Platt. So when it comes down to it, I am also taking Yankton in this one in a close game, just because I think the Bucks have established themselves as the second best team overall.
And in this game, it's hard to be more physical than the T-Titans, but that's been the focus all week for Yankton. Brady Muth said, we are going to meet that challenge physical-wise, and if they can, this is their game to win.
So we're both picking Yankton in the other AA semifinal. Moving on to 11A, number 4 Sioux Falls Christian, number 1 Del Rapids. We had Sioux Falls Christian on our air last week as they defeated Dakota Valley in the quarterfinals for the second straight season. Unfortunately for the Chargers, their quarterback Lincoln Prinz got hurt during the game, AC joint issue, and they're not likely to have him this week.
Yeah.
We're going to see what the Sioux Falls Christian game plan is, because when Canyon Prince came in, they essentially were a ground team.
They were a ground team, and I think Canyon was able to scramble a little bit. I mean, he didn't get him a huge total of yards on the ground, but he gives them that ability to run the football. And between Braden Whitty and Johnny Skyberg, I think you're going to see a lot of different plays, and that's your only chance against Del Rapids, to slow the game down and somehow find a way to score touchdowns on the ground.
Yeah, Canyon Prince was able to throw a little bit late against Dakota Valley, but you're right. I think Sioux Falls Christian, they just kind of have to, if Lincoln Prince can't play, they kind of have to throw everything out and just go for, ground and pound attack. Maybe use Skyberg a little bit more in the game. I thought he probably could have been used a little bit more against Dakota Valley. Obviously, they were relying on Braden Whitty a lot too, but I think they're going to need more balance in that backfield.
They're going to need some big plays too. Cole Snyder's their big play guy, and it's hard to feed him the ball when you have the backup quarterback in. But they've had another week to work together. Maybe Cole has something up his sleeve. But this Del Rapids team, that's where the focus is. If they play their game, if they play a complete game, as Jordan Huska said, we're able now to play a complete game, all three phases of the game. There shouldn't be a team in 11A that should be able to contest with them if they don't make turnovers or beat themselves. They are a very, very solid team. Blocking, tackling. Mason Stubbe's been unbelievable this year. And if for some reason they would have to pass,
I was going to say,
they have a D1 quarterback who can do that.
Yeah, that was going to be my other question is, will Jack Henry have to pass a lot in this game? My thinking is no, just because I think both teams are going to want to keep things on the ground. But as you mentioned, he's a future Division I quarterback. He's been excellent this year when he's needed to be as far as throwing the football. I look at this, I already thought it was going to be an uphill challenge for Sioux Falls Christian, even if Lincoln Prince was healthy. They're going to need to play a perfect game. I think Del Rapids wins this one.
Yeah, I think Del Rapids. I think almost everybody's going to pick Del Rapids in this one. They're just such a powerful team, and they'll be heading to defend their title.
Yep, defending 11A champions are Del Rapids. Meanwhile, Sioux Falls Christian, they're trying to go to the Dome for the first time since they had back-to-back titles in 11B back in 2017 and 2018. Moving on to the other 11A semifinal, the surprise, number 6 Lennox against number 2 West Central. Lennox defeating Canton last week.
Yeah.
And that was a bit of a shocker just because that Oriole offense had struggled down the stretch. They scored 28 points in their quarterfinal game. They had scored 28 in their previous 3 games combined.
Right.
And they get 28 against Canton, a run-heavy team. And that's my question. Can the Orioles do it again against another run-heavy team like West Central?
It's a tall task. What they did against Canton, they rode through the highs and lows of that game and were able to stay steady. And that's been an issue for Lennox the last few weeks. When they hit the lows, they kind of hit the skids. They played very well throughout that game, whether they were going high or low, and they did get Porter Enan involved very much so in that game, and he helped them even on a rainy, terrible weather night. The big star came out to play. So with Katzer and Enan, there's not much better of a combination than those two if you can pass the ball. But can you do anything other than that? You need to have a diversified offense to beat this West Central defense that has been so good this year, leading the class in points against per game, giving up just 12.7 points per game, and they dominated on the ground the last time these two teams played, which was just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, it was a 36-6 victory for West Central about 3 weeks ago. And not only that in terms of diversifying the offense, but the Lennox defense has to hold its ground against this Trojan running attack.
And it's so hard you can't key on one guy. Last time they played each other, 6 different players for West Central ran for at least 20 yards in the game. 6 different players. Yeah. That's just, they could plug anybody back there and make something happen. So I think this West Central team is really hard to defend, and Lennox's defense they've been good. They just haven't been good enough to stop an offense like this. Last time they gave up 286 yards on the ground. It's going to be a challenge for the Orioles.
Yeah, and you mentioned the diversity of the Oriole offense. They only rushed for 40 yards in that game against West Central back in the regular season. I like what you said. I think Katzer and Enan are a great 1-2 combo in terms of passing. My question is, do they want to pass as much? Do they want to maybe slow the game down because they know West Central is going to be running a lot?
I'll tell you what, they've had a sophomore running back who stepped up in Tate Gertis, who at the beginning of the year wasn't used as much, and he keeps getting used more and more, and he's passing. He's getting over 5 yards per carry. So maybe he's the secret weapon in this game for Lennox, is if they can get Gertis going for Lennox, maybe they can push this game into the end, and then it comes down to, turnovers and final possessions.
Yeah, when I look again at just the entire scope of what happened earlier this season and Lennox trying to pull another upset off against a run-heavy team, I just personally don't see it. I think West Central is going to be able to dominate in the trenches in this game, so I'm picking the Trojans.
I am too. When Lennox plays at their best, they can push a team like West Central. But West Central's been too consistent for me to pick against them.
So we are both predicting a rematch in Class 11A between Del Rapids and West Central. Moving on to 11B. Now this is a game that I'm really looking forward to. It's the rematch between Elk Point Jefferson and Winter, the championship rematch from last year in the semifinals this season. Remember, EPJ won their very first championship over Winter 21-14 last year at the Dome. They're responsible for Winter's only loss over the past 3-4 seasons.
Yeah.
And you can bet there are some Warriors who remember that.
And, just to make the plot even thicker, 2 years ago they played in the semifinals. So This is the third year in a row that one of these two teams will go home because of the other team. So Elk Point Jefferson has really done a good job of stepping up their game throughout the year. Last week, they felt like they did not play their best game and still were able to get a victory against Tri-Valley. They shot themselves in the foot early on, needed a big play at the end of the game to break the tie. But Elk Point Jefferson has really played the part maybe better than anybody thought they could after winning a title last year, losing all those seniors who made a huge impact on that championship team, and still getting back to the semifinal game. That shows a lot of what Jake Terry's done with this group, a really solid group.
And you look at the Huskies, as you mentioned, a lot of kids from last year's team ended up graduating, but there's still some players on this year's team that remember defeating Winter. So can they use that experience positively? And then also think about the fact that EPJ's had to come back from halftime deficits a couple times now this season, including both in the regular season and their quarterfinal matchup against Tri-Valley. And I don't want to necessarily classify that as a negative experience, but can they use all of those experiences to help them in this semifinal?
Yeah, all those have helped. Because this could be a grinder either way. You expect it to be fairly close because Winter, as dominant as they are, they're not gonna, score 4 touchdowns in the first half probably against a team like Elk Point Jefferson. So, yeah, that comeback ability, that capitalizing on turnovers like Elk Point Jefferson has done in the last few weeks, those are going to be huge in this game. But Winter still has a couple studs in Aiden Barfus and Sean Hammerbeck who make it hard for anybody to do anything offensively. Those guys are really good on the defensive side of the ball.
And they're really good, obviously, offensively in that backfield. And when you look at the Winter offensive line, the ability to get push, this is a Warrior team. They're not going to pass. And if they're passing, they're obviously in dire straits. But I think Winter's running game, the fact to me that they beat West Central at West Central 28-0 earlier this season. So they got a shutout on the road against a team a class above them, a good team in a class above them. I just look at Winter and I think they have recaptured some of that magic from their championship seasons earlier.
Yeah, some of the doubt early in the year, were they for real, were they not, I think has been put to rest. And you're right, that Trojan game was huge for Winter and their confidence. Coach Trent Olson said that this EPJ team is super hard to prepare for. And that could cause some chaos, could cause this game to be closer than some people think. But I think in the end, Winter gets it done.
Yeah, I agree. I think Winter, motivated by the loss in the championship game last season, and the fact that this season they've been improving over the weeks, and obviously they're shutting a lot of teams out. I don't think this is going to be a shutout, but I do think EPJ doesn't quite have enough this season to get past Winter, so I'm picking the Warriors.
Yep.
All right, the other 11B semifinal. Battle of upset-minded teams.
Yeah.
Both teams won on the road, going West River to East River last week. Number 10 Rapid City Christian with a win over previously undefeated Dual, 13-8, got a goal line stand in the final seconds. And then Hot Springs, all over Sioux Valley, 49-13. That was one where you predicted it. You knew about this Hot Springs team kind of before anyone else. What do you like about them as we approach the semifinal?
It comes down to their physicality and their offensive line, and everybody's going to talk about how Braden Peterson had a huge week against Sioux Valley, or Cameron Macheski, or whether it's Colin Iverson, but it's the offensive line that makes this team go. And a lot of those guys came back from last year's team. They lost some of their playmakers, but they're still cruising because they can block and they can tackle. They've made adjustments throughout the year, and they have several different weapons that can get this thing done. I really like what Hot Springs did last week. I don't know if this game presents a lot of challenges. Mm-hmm. They played each other already once this year.
Yep.
And when you have two good coaching staff, it feels like the games get closer and closer the second time you play.
They do. And then you look at Rapid City Christian. Over their past 3 games, they've given up a combined 15 points. Remember, they played Woonsocket, Washington Springs, Sanborn Central to end the regular season. That was a 7-0 game. And then you get the rematch in the playoffs on the same field, and they won handily that time, 36-7, I believe, the final. And then 13-8 over Dual. So to me, what I like about Rapid City Christian is they played a lot of different types of games. You even look back to their loss to Hot Springs in the regular season, 23-13. Closer than people think, because one of those touchdowns for Hot Springs was a Braden Peterson special teams touchdown.
Right. That's how that game started last time that they played each other, and without that, it's a 1-score game. I feel like Rapid City Christian figured some things out as that game went along, and hopefully for them, they can carry that on. They just ran out of time in that game against Hot Springs. They feel like if they can continue that game, which they will be able to this Friday, they are going to be much more competitive.
Yeah, I think unfortunately for Rapid City Christian, they're going to need that offense to do something against Hot Springs. I don't think 13 points is going to get it done like it did against Dual. The 36 that they scored in the first round might be able to get it done, but again, Hot Springs has been dynamic offensively recently.
They've been dynamic offensively, the top points per game in 11A. But look at Rapid City Christian. They've got the second best defense in points against in 11B, excuse me. So that's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenge. They're going to need to bust some big plays like they did with Braden Peterson last week, and like they did with Braden Peterson on his kick return the first time they played the Comets.
Well, whomever wins this contest, it will be pretty historic. For Hot Springs, they're seeking their first Dome appearance since 2003. It's been 20 years. It was an 11A championship loss to West Central, and Rapid City Christian has never been to the Dakota Dome. And so when it comes down to it, I look at the fact that neither of these teams really has to travel too far. Obviously, it's a home game for Hot Springs, but Rapid City Christian, it's only about 45 minutes, an hour away. No big travel for either side. And I just look at momentum. And even though Hot Springs went over to Sioux Valley and thoroughly dominated that game, I think based on the regular season matchup, I think Rapid City Christian can make enough adjustments. I think their defense has been playing well recently, so I'm going to ride the Comets and take Rapid City Christian over Hot Springs.
I'm not. I'm taking Hot Springs in this one. And you look at the physicality that they showed against who many thought was the best team in this class against Sioux Valley last week. I think they carry that again this week. But I do think it has a chance to be a very close game, just like it was the first time they played. And I could make a point. I can see where you're coming from. People are kind of overlooking what Rapid City Christian has done. They've beaten some really good teams over these last 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, the dual game and having that goal line stand in the final seconds, to me, showed me something about the defense. Now, if both the quarterback and the receiver, can do well on offense, I think they can do well. But I think this defense has really started to show itself over the past couple of weeks. So that is why I'm going to take the upset and take the Comets.
Yeah, they're one of the few teams I think that can handle them on a down-to-down basis, can handle that Hot Springs offensive line. I just think there's going to be a couple big plays from either Macheski or Braden Peterson that gets this win for Hot Springs. And so there's our second difference. I'm taking Rapid City Christian. You were taking Hot Springs in the other 11B semifinal. So spoiler alert, we're going to agree on everything in 9-man. 9AA. Still worth listening to.
Of course it's still worth listening to. You've been listening to us all year long, so why not continue listening? 9AA, Hamlin and Parkston. I thought Hanson would defeat Parkston last week. I will fully admit I was wrong about that. I just thought the Beavers played Parkston better than anyone. But I think Parkston not only showed they were the better team, but recording their 6th consecutive shutout. They have not given up a point since September 15th. We're in November now. Parkston seems to be, to me, to be a team that is just fully complimentary and thoroughly dominant.
They are thoroughly dominant, and their head coach, Matt Grave, after that quarterfinal win last week, talked about how dominant his defense has been this season.
It's been a couple of years since we've been at home. I'm very glad that we can have the community here to support. You can tell this was going to be a great environment. Both communities represented very well. Haven't seen Hanson. I hear about the Frazier kid, but obviously they have more than him. You don't get to go that record with him missing most of the season unless you're talented. I heard they got a couple big guys. Just excited to keep moving, be able to advance. Just very proud. I think defense wins championships. You take pride in your defense, and your offense feeds off of it. But our defense put us in a situation where we could go block a punt. They're deep in their own end zone, and just very proud of how our team performed tonight.
Yeah, defense is pretty dominant when you're averaging giving up a safety a game. Literally, their average is 2 points given up per game.
They have to play Hamlin, though, and this is a team that can score in bunches and I think is more explosive than they have been all season long. Now that they have Luke Frazier back, they haven't seen what he can do totally yet, but he's back in the mix. And Zach Van Meter, one of the few guys who went off last week in the bad weather through the air.
Yeah.
So I think they come with a few different options this game. They're the leading scoring team in this class, and they're going to give a test to this Parkston defense.
Yeah, how do you reconcile the fact that Hamlin averages nearly 46 points per game and Parkston has not given up a point in a month and a half? Will Hamlin be able to score? I think Hamlin is going to score in this game. The question is, are they going to do enough to top Parkston? I just look at how Parkston has so thoroughly dominated everyone. I think Hamlin will give them a fight, but I'm taking the Trojans. I'm not going to make the same mistake twice.
I tell you what, I could, at the beginning of the year, I had Hamlin as my #1 team. And since then, they have done nothing to let me down from that. But Parkston has played so well that they have increased their expectations even higher than where I had Hamlin at. So I'm taking Parkston as well. They have Kramer back, who is able to run the ball, Coulter Kramer, along with Braden Jervik, along with B, C, D, E options in that backfield.
Reichert, who had a touchdown last week.
Exactly. They got tons of guys who can get it done, and I think in the end, that depth is going to help them win this game.
Yeah, so we're both taking Parkston in the first 9AA semifinal. The other one, #3 Howard, #2 Platte-Geddes. And you look at these teams, neither of them statistically are at the top of the class in really any category. But Howard seems to have the better numbers overall. Their win over Elton Lake Benton last week, kind of a sloppy game, but they did enough.
They did enough. They didn't get to feature their passing, and we talked to Pat Rummel after the game, and he said, we're just happy to be playing for another championship, and these kids are pumped up and ready to get back to the Dome where they were a couple of years ago.
Biggest thing is everybody's good. And I told the guys tonight, you got a chance to go play for a state championship for this game coming up. So, there's no need to hold anything back, and obviously we'll prepare that way.
Yes, the old Dan Foutzen water boy. Last game of the year, Brent can't hold anything back now. But it's true. I think you look at the Tigers, remember when they moved up to 9AA last season, undefeated in the regular season, then got shocked by Parkston in the quarterfinals. I think Howard, similar to other teams, is kind of on a mission in terms of proving that they belong in this class. Again, I mean, they've lost 2 games in this class for the past 2 years. It's not like they don't belong, but I think they want to prove it on this big stage. With Platte-Geddes, can they get enough defense to stop Howard? That's my big question.
Yeah, offensively, they've really showed that they can play, and Joey Foxley has done a great job this year, getting better and better, giving them maybe one of the most dynamic talents in this class. But really, for me, it comes down to turnovers, and can they create turnovers against a really good Howard team that takes care of the football. So defensively, if they can create some turnovers, I think they hang with Howard in this game. If they can't, to me, Howard will find a way to get this thing done.
Yeah, I went back and forth on this game a lot. I just think that overall, I think Howard is a more complete team, and so I am taking the Tigers as well in this one to get
good run by Platte-Geddes this year, though.
Yeah, to get the road victory. And so we are both predicting a Howard-Parkston championship, which will be very interesting if it comes to fruition, because that is a rematch of the quarterfinals where Parkston defeated Howard last season.
You know they have it circled on their calendar.
Absolutely they do. 9A, Canastota and Warner. I don't think Canastota is going to score 70 points again like they did against Gregory last week. But can the Hawks generate enough offense? I think Tage Ortman is kind of one of those do-it-all type of players, but they're going up against a really good defensive team in Warner.
They are, and speaking of quarterfinal matchups to remember, last year played in the quarters. I was at that game, and I have never been to a high school game where the momentum has changed as much as it did in that game. Canastota ran it all over Warner in the first half. Warner came out of the locker room, or out of the side of their field, and absolutely took that game over in the second. And you can bet these Canastota Hawks have remembered that for over 365 days now as they get a chance to redeem themselves. I think they're probably the toughest matchup that Warner could have hoped to play in a semifinal round. This is going to be a very extremely tough game for Warner, who's played an extremely tough schedule, but this will be the biggest challenge of the year.
It will be. They're only giving up around 6 points per game. They're scoring around 50. I guess my thing for the Monarchs is, can they keep Canastota in that high-powered offense off the field? I think Warner has obviously been a very good running team over the course of the season, and I think they're going to need that in the semifinal.
I think they will. Hunter Kramer, one of the most dynamic players in this class, has a chance to shine once again. Tage Ortman, one of the most dynamic players in this class, has a chance to shine, but it's going to be these supporting players. I think they almost negate each other, and the supporting players, which guys are going to step up? I think the Monarchs will step up once again. They've been in some tough situations this year and found a way to win. I think they find a way to win on their home field.
Yeah, I agree. I'm taking Warner in this victory, or in this game as well. I just think Canastota, for as great as their offense has been, there's been some inconsistencies. Everyone was in love with them after they defeated Howard to start the season, but then, just some tough games down the stretch, maybe not performing at their best. I think they're doing well right now. I certainly think they're going to give Warner a game. It's hard for me to pick against the Monarchs.
It is, and I feel bad because Canastota could play with them, and of course I picked against Canastota last week, so I know I don't have any friends if I go to Canastota right now, but I just think that Warner is too good of a team, and they're a team of destiny this year in 9A.
All right, we're both taking Warner. The other 9A semifinal, Deubrook, number 7 Deubrook, who defeated previously undefeated Alcester Hudson last week in kind of a sloppy game, 14-10. They're going to go up against Phillip, who's the 3 seed, but Phillip has been fantastic all season long. Phillip
has put the most points up, allowed the least, but then you look at their schedule and you're like, well, did they or didn't they? And then they played Chester last week, and I thought, well, Chester's going to at least be able to score on them, but I think Phillip will be able to outscore them. Well, Phillip handled Chester, so that is a huge sign in favor of these Scotties as being as tough as people think. They are the real deal. But Deubrook comes in, they played a much tougher schedule this year.
They did.
And they've been playing with house money these last couple of weeks. Their head coach, Nathan Lamb, said, we just need to enjoy our time together. We love playing the game. We got to be focused, but we got to stay loose in this one. And they come in as the underdogs. And sometimes, that's the place you want to be in a game like this, that long road trip across the state, coming in as underdogs. Nobody's talking about the Deubrook Dolphins, and you're playing the number 1 offensive and defensive team in the class. It's gonna be a really good game. You got some really good players in this game.
I guess my question for Deubrook, I think they can generate enough offense. It's, can the defense slow Phillip down? That's gonna be my big thing.
And that was the problem for Chester. Even in the bad weather, Phillip was able to move the ball. I think this week, Phillip, again, they are so strong. Their quarterback, their running back, Turkleson has done a great job this year. Really a huge ask for the Deubrook Dolphins to shut down Phillip. And again, I think that's what's going to be the weight in the favor of the Scotties on this one.
Yeah, can they get out to an early edge? Because when they get out to an early lead, they seem to perform well.
Well, yeah, you get a team down, and there's some teams that kind of let the other team play around for a while, cat and mouse them. This is a team that just puts their opponents away. So if they get off to a quick start, this is the Scotties game.
Yeah, I'm taking Phillip in this one just because I think they're going to be able to get some separation early from Deubrook. It's going to be hard for that Deubrook Dolphin offense to kind of keep up a little bit later in the game. When you look at the victory over Alcester Hudson, again, it was one of those games where they kept it close. Alcester Hudson, despite being undefeated, didn't necessarily have the greatest quote-unquote offense. They relied a lot on low-scoring, low-possession type games. Phillip is not that team. I think Phillip gets out to an early lead and Deubrook has a hard time keeping up.
I agree. I think Phillip is going to have a chance to prove, even with that weaker schedule, that they belong in the Dome. And they'll show it by beating a really solid Deubrook Dolphin team.
So we are both taking Phillip in 9A. Moving down, finally, to 9B. Interesting matchups. Let's start with Potter County. The 11th seeded Battlers, the lowest seed that is still alive here in these semifinals. And their task is going to take on Falkton, which had been the #1 team in most media polls for throughout the entire season. They're the #2 seed here in the 9B playoffs. And, Potter County, say what you want about them, but they pulled a couple upsets in a row.
They have been crazy, and they've been on a roller coaster all season long, starting with their head coach, Vern Smith. Shout out to Vern. Hope you're feeling better. He's been on the sideline for a long time in Gettysburg as the head coach this year. Has had some health problems. Has to step away and let Kyle Kuzer do his job taking over the team. This is his first year with the team. And Kuzer told me that the middle of the year they had these really tough games that they ended up losing, even a game against Harry and Selby that they lost and some of these other games. But they grew so much each and every one of those games. He thinks they're a totally different team, and he's glad they come in as the #11 seed because he thinks that makes them play loose enough where they can compete with anybody in this class.
Yeah, when you're a double-digit seed and you make the semifinals, I think the term that has been thrown out by a lot of coaches is house money at this point. You're not expected to be at this point, so why not just let it hang loose? But I look at this Falkland team, and they're a similar team to Parks in 9AA. They've just dominated all season long.
They have. They've got some big boys up front, and their quarterback's a big boy. Lane Cotton, 6'3", 190 pounds. He can hammer and be the hammer and not the nail. And then Garrett Kramer, what he does, what makes him so special is not necessarily his speed, which he does have, but it's his patience as a running back. You watch him, he sits back and waits for the hole to develop. They've got the big guys making the holes, and then he hits it and he's off. So this is a complete team. These seniors on this Falkton area team have been getting better over the last 4, 5, 6 years since they've been involved in this varsity team. This is the one team that they've kind of looked at and said, we have a chance to be really special.
And I think their special journey is going to continue. I'm picking Falkton in this game. I look at the Potter County, you look at the totality of their stats, they're giving up nearly 38 points per game. I just think that they kept things close. That's why they defeated Corsica Stickney last week. I just don't think they're going to be able to keep this game close, so I'm taking Falkton.
I think so too. I think the fun ride for Potter County is finally going to come to an end, but only because they're playing the toughest team in 9B. This is an extremely tough ask for an 11 seed to go into Falkton area, a team that leads the class in points and points given up. It's just too good of a team. Give me the Trojans.
And then the final 9B semifinal, DeSmet and Avon. Avon, the #1 seed in 9B based on the points, which obviously there's a statistical formula with that, but we had talked about how DeSmet and Falkton were consistently some of the top 2 teams in this conference. DeSmet comes in as the 4 seed. Will DeSmet rise to the challenge? I think that DeSmet's record is good, but then you look at it, they've only had 1 win against an above 500 team. They faced a lot of lower seeds in the playoffs so far. This is going to be their toughest test of the year.
The couple of games that they were challenged, one of them against Stanley County, they beat them the year before and thought maybe that wouldn't be as hard a game as it ended up being. They lost that game. And then Elkton in the DVC championship game, that was just a hard-fought game. It could have went either way, and Elkton got the best of them. So they haven't had a lot of games where they've had to be at their best to win the game, and they're going to have to be at their best to beat Avon in this one, and mainly because they have to go against Isaiah Meyer. This guy, 1,463 yards on the year, 28 rushing touchdowns, and he feels like he wears teams down, and by the end of the game, Meyer is always at his best for Avon. It's going to be a huge challenge for the DeSmet, but DeSmet, I think, has overall better athletes in this one as a team. So you can make cases for either one of these teams to pull this game out.
And when you look at Avon, my thing is, what type of game are we getting from them? They've played in so many weird games. There haven't been a lot of games where they've been like thoroughly dominant. There have been games where they've, been dominant. Then there's other games where it's like, why is that a one-score game?
Exactly.
And, why did they score 38 points one time and 14 another time? I get that Meyer is a fantastic back, and I think he will be able to do damage against DeSmit. But I look at that defense, it's only giving up 10 points a game.